I think you mentioned something on the lines of treating data as a product.
Mhm.
But what does this actually mean in the context of an enterprise setup?
Data mesh is one of those, I wouldn't say rare, but one of those concept in technology that hits all the right notes. Like when you talk about it, it's all ideal and it's all like a la la land, right? That it talks about decentralization, it talks about
Absolutely.
autonomy, and it talks about like domain ownership. So you have a right ownership, treating data as a product, all cool stuff. So
Got it.
in a nutshell, the data mesh is all about federation, federating responsibility to more to the domains, and at the same time, responsibility of governance, responsibility of producing the right data and
Hmm.
producing complete data is more given to the domain rather than one central team responsible for it. So that's the that's the core pillar of the concept.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on show, we're joined by Jai Sen, Director of Data Engineering at PayPal, and a leader redefining how enterprise data is built, owned, and scaled. Over the past 15 plus years, Jay has architected data systems that move petabytes, enable real time experimentation, and transform how teams think about ownership and accountability. At PayPal, he's championing the move from centralized bottlenecks to decentralized clarity, applying data mesh principles to make data usable, discoverable, and treated as a true product. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of Tech Dogs Discover Dialogues. Jay, it's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thanks, Vikram, for having me.
So Jay, you've been in the data space, long before buzzwords like data mesh or modern stack, became mainstream. I'd love to start by really just unpacking, your professional journey so far. Yeah. So why don't you walk us through, how you went from working on Hadoop clusters, to real-time systems, and then leading large data transformations at PayPal today. So would love for you to take the stage.
Yeah, so after my graduation, I joined Microsoft as first company, but I quickly left and kind of always wanted to work in the startups, right? So I worked on a couple of different startups, and one of them I ended up joining this great startup that they were trying to solve or make a distributed platforms available in the cloud.
Hmm.
That's where the Hadoop journey really started for me. I think we were too early and too ahead of our time, and that our didn't do really well. But I definitely learned a lot from seniors at the time from all these great company Google and Yahoo, who worked on these big data distributed systems, and
Hmm.
I learned a lot from them. I primarily contributed to Apache Hive and Uzi and other things, but learned more about Hadoop as well at the same time. So I got very familiar with the whole ecosystem.
Mhm.
That's when I got an opportunity to join PayPal. This is at the time when the split was happening between PayPal and eBay, and PayPal
Mhm.
was creating brand new team about their Hadoop development team. So I ended up joining that to lead that team.
Hmm.
That's where I worked on a bunch of Hadoop different Hadoop projects. So far, I do consider myself one of those lucky one who get an opportunity to work on some of the not just coolest but the complex projects in the company. So I got that every other year. So far I have worked on pretty much all the data platforms that we have, and now we are trying to solve the bigger problems with the newer concepts. So data mesh is one of those.
And so let's start from the top, right? So this term data mesh, obviously it gets tossed around a lot in conferences. We've seen a lot of LinkedIn posts from our community as well. But for someone who doesn't live in this world, it's almost like uh, it's jargon. So could you explain to a wider audience, perhaps, what data mesh is and why is it gaining so much attention in the world of data and data analytics today?
Yeah, pretty loaded question, right? So let me start by saying that data mesh is not for everyone,
Okay.
right? In fact, you would not even understand why data mesh is suggesting and recommending something if you have not worked on, or your company is not big enough, right?
Hmm.
Or does not have too many producers of data and too many consumers of the data. If your organization does not have a situation where your producer of the data don't know who are their consumers,
Hmm.
then you probably not gonna make a lot of sense out of data mesh like concept. um, the best resources to really understand data mesh is definitely from the original author of this concept, right? Zaman. Martin Fowler has a couple of great articles around data mesh, and those are, I think, still the best resources to really understand data mesh.
Hmm.
And it not only just talks about what data mesh is, but then also the whole justification or reasoning around why we need something like data mesh, right? So that, in a nutshell, as Zamak called it, is a socio technological transformation around how the data organization really operates and behave
Hmm.
in order to get certain benefits that we today see we are having a bottleneck because of, right? So maybe let me take you a couple of step back, so to put it correctly, or in a
Hmm.
better way. Like 10-15 years ago, when the data was, like, becoming larger and larger, like everybody, like terabyte was a big data at the time, like,
Right.
2012, 2013, and very handful, or maybe Fortune 500 would have petabytes of data, right? Nowadays, even some of the startups can have a petabytes of data, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So um, that time, the answer to this was a data lake. So data lake was the solution to the problem that we were facing, and now the same data lake, I feel, has become a bottleneck for
Hmm.
the next stage of advancements or innovation for the company. So that is where really the data mesh comes into picture, suggesting that, okay, your data lake has become really a data swamp,
Hmm.
and you are, if you feel that you're bottlenecked by the data lake, which is one central organization, that's where really you need a data mesh concept. So
Got
in
it.
a nutshell, the data mesh is all about um, federation, right? Um, Federating responsibility to more to the domains, and at the same time, responsibility of governance, responsibility of producing the right data and
Hmm.
producing complete data is more given to the domain rather than one central team responsible for it. So that's the that's the core pillar of the concept.
And you touched upon it, earlier, where you talked about data lakes as being one of the challenges, from the earlier architectures that were in place. But what are some of the other key points that you see with, the traditional or the centralized data architectures that are in place, and why, in many ways, data mesh is the solution?
I think a lot of, this is one of those concepts that, if things are done right, then you don't need this,
Hmm.
right? So if you have a data lake that is operating at 80 to 90% efficiencies, you have all the visibility you need, you have all the lineage you need, right? Anybody can figure out what is the right source of data,
Hmm.
and you don't have the problem of data duplications. If all of this is not there, and if your data lake is operating at a very ideal stage with efficiency, you
Hmm.
probably don't need a data mesh.
Hmm.
Data mesh is purely to address the problem of data lake that is due to the way it got operated.
Hmm.
And now there is no way out of it, because once the pattern is established, once the consumers are established, you can't break that
Hmm.
processes. and there is no better way to just optimize it being backward compatible.
Hmm.
So that's where, and that is one. And then second is, I mean, one argument is that okay, you can always reset. I mean, you can take all the problems of data lake and then fix it,
Right.
and you start from the most efficient data lake again. There is no guarantee that it will not end up in the same situation,
Hmm.
right? Because the nature of data lake is that there is one central team making decisions on how I should make the data available to you, rather than the producer of the data making those decisions.
Correct.
So you will end up in that situation again and again. Every time it's more of like, you go to the most inefficient way and become a bottleneck. You can fix the problem, you come down to the zero, you can
Hmm.
start that journey again, right? So it becomes repetitive. And there's no guarantee that you will actually be not affecting the business while you go through these cycles, right?
Got it.
And one of the biggest benefit that data mesh is claiming is that this is all big, this is all for the business. It is to enable consumers so that they don't have to wait for day long ETL pipelines. They don't have to be worried about whether they're sourcing the data from the right table or not,
Hmm.
and they have data available right from the domain, so they can react on it within an hour, or if not within seconds or minutes, right? If somebody is changing their email address,
Right.
marketing team should know that right away, or at least before sending the email campaign, rather than next day, right? So data lake right now has become that long pipeline, but batch pipelines that will take like typically a day, or even sometime 2 day, to
Right.
finish that end-to-end process to reach to the consumer. So uh, the the benefit claimed by the data mesh is that okay, if the domain are creating a complete data set with all the required transformations, by the way,
Hmm.
then consumer should be able to consume this directly from the domain, and that enables consumption of the same data in a real-time fashion as well. So it enables the real-time pipeline, which is fairly, I would say, not even possible today end to end,
Right.
given that there are a lot of batch pipeline involved. So really carrying out a real-time event-driven system end to end is not a possibility in the today's data lake world.
And I have two follow-up questions for you on this, right? So first is, I think you mentioned something on the lines of treating data as a product.
Mhm.
But what does this actually mean in the context of an enterprise setup, uh, if I may understand?
Yeah, so let's take an example, and this is what I pretty much covered in the workshop as well, in the OSDC workshop, ODSC. So typically, the services are designed, especially with the advent of microservice architecture.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
These services are designed to do a very granular operation and scale best at that.
Hmm.
Right? So you will have, let's say, if you take a user as an example, which the example I took, user can have like 20, 30 different attributes. One of them, let's say, is an address, right? You may have a very dedicated microservice which just handles the address, is
Correct.
very good at that, includes the functionality of making sure address is accurate, its actual physical address is accurate, right? Accuracy is high, it is complete, right? Making sure it has zip code. If it's not, it will try to figure it out. All of that. So all that intelligence, all of that will be in the microservice.
Hmm.
And there will be other services which will be, taking like a basic core profile attributes, right? Like your name and surname, date of birth, or email address, phone number, and various different things, right?
Hmm.
Now, if you look at these two services, the currently what you would have in a data lake is that both of these services is backed by some different tables, which is normalized and optimized to operate this service on.
Hmm.
So in the database, you would typically have a very, very normalized tables, at least to the 3NF normalization level. So you will see multiple tables that represents the user as a whole,
Hmm.
right? What happens today in the data lake systems is that we typically bring all of those tables via CDC, and then there is one-to-one mapping of those tables on OLTP systems and transactional systems, and then on OLAP systems, right?
Hmm.
And then you bring those. The challenge starts after that. You do have to bring it. There's no question about that. But after that, how do you stitch those tables together
Hmm.
really depends upon, or not really depends upon, but really is being decided by the data lake team. Domain don't have much say in that,
Okay.
right? Today,
Hmm.
though domain will give you some knowledge about this is how the tables are structured and people will try to make sense of it, but then the data lake team would do or prepare a data set according to the consumer ask,
Hmm.
right? So there will be some consumer which will say that, oh, you know what, I don't care about anything else, I just care about user ID and their address and email, possibly. So and I cannot wait, I don't want to deal with a large table, just give me the table that is easy for me to pick up and join with my own table. So
Hmm.
then data lake team will create this table for them. um of course, this is like much later in the life cycle. They will begin with something like a dimension table that holds all the all the user informations and customer information. But then
Hmm.
there is always a customer or a consumer which will come with a special need that do this. The main challenge here or a problem here is that the decision about creating a representation of a data is left to the data lake team. So
Got it.
they often think a lot more from a technical angle on how this data should be available for to make their process efficient, right? Something that they can build on top of what they have, rather than thinking from the domain business perspective that how this data should be really be available.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another example that, let's say tomorrow if somebody say that I want to add one more attribute, the consumer is saying that I need alternate email address, right? What is a possibility that the team will actually go to the source and say that we need to change all the way from the source? That will almost unlikely to happen, because what is established is established, and you don't want to change things there. You are always adding a layer on top of it as a
Right.
solution, and those layers upon layers and upon layers, it doesn't happen. This whole you don't see the problems and challenges of data lake in like 2 3 years, right? It takes 5 plus years for you to realize those, or see the layers of onions, right? So after 5, 10, 15 layers, it
Hmm.
becomes impossible for you to touch these layers and optimize further, right? um, of course it's doable, technically it's feasible, but it's just the practicality and reality of how the things becomes untouchable,
Hmm.
unaddressable. So this is where you asked about the how domain representation would work, right? So these layers are, if we put this responsibility on the domain,
Hmm.
these layers get collapsed into one, which is domain. So anything you need, domain has to provide you in terms of the product. So all the transformations, all the different representation or data integrations happens at one place.
Yeah.
I feel this is the main idea, or a main thing that forces
Hmm.
the future to remain at that level and not to allow addition of layers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that way you are guaranteeing that I will not increase the layers upon layers on the central data lake team, because the responsibility is to the domain, and if domain has to do it, of course they will do it at the one place. They will have some kind of a process which will bring these three different entities and tables from different tables and stitch together as a single representation of a user, and that will be the data set, everybody will have it available.
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So if there is a change that needs to happen to the user data set or user data as a product, it will only happen at that user data as a product.
Got it. Got it.
So and all the change that happens, of course there is a concept of maintaining the contract. So you have to make sure that you're not breaking all the existing consumers. Typically addition of the columns is not a problem. So you do maintain that backward compatibility at one layer. So even if you have to deviate, you will deviate at one place only, and that prevents creation of further layers just for the one thing.
I think you mentioned during this was that uh, in terms of and I think at the start of the conversation, right? So data meshes are not for everyone. Okay. What I mean by that is, how does one company come to know, if I was to put it the other way around, that is data mesh for me or is data mesh not for me? How does a business arrive to that decision?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Maybe we should have a framework to do that. We need some decision tree for that. But that's a good idea for blog. Um, so number one thing I touch upon, right, is that if there is a newcomer in the company in the
Hmm.
data space,
Hmm.
if you measure the amount of time for them, for him or her, takes to figure out where is my where can I get user's email address,
Hmm.
where can I get my company's account or company's users information, and if he or she can figure that out in less than one day, you probably don't need it. Of course, this is one angle of saying it, right?
Yeah.
Because that can be also made possible by having a right data catalog tool, having the data described in a nicely in a very complete way, and you don't have so much of duplication problem. It all is combined in this,
Hmm.
right? The second one, and there can be multiple angles and multiple checklists that you have to go through, but the second checklist I can suggest is that um, if if your consumer knows the data you are consuming, right? If they know who are the producer,
Hmm.
if they don't know who's the producer of this data, you clearly have so many hops in this, the data life cycle of the how you are prepared this data in a way that they don't know the right producer of it, right? And I've seen that repeatedly over and over again, that typically the producer don't know the consumers and consumers don't know the producers. It's more like your left hand don't know what the right hand is doing, and the right hand don't know what the left hand is doing, right? If that is the case, you definitely should look into the data mesh.
Hmm.
But you can also argue that and the third one, right, is, as I mentioned earlier also, that if you think that you do have all the right tools and the data lake is operating with very strict decision making process,
Hmm.
which is able to avoid adding layers unnecessarily, and you have managed it very nicely so that it is contained and not affecting the consumers or the business in terms of achieving their own velocity or innovation,
Hmm.
then you're good too, right? But I haven't seen anybody coming to me and talking about, oh, we have the best data lake in the world, right? And we don't have any problem. I haven't heard that. That everybody is complaining about some sort of problem, whether it's a lineage problem or whether it's a visibility problem, cataloging problem, or at the end quality problem, right? Or consumer complaining about, oh, something changed we didn't even know and then it broke my process, right? Something like that. So all of those problems, if you manage to handle it by all of the existing tools, you probably don't need the data mesh.
And if businesses decide to explore data mesh, what in your opinion is the best way to pilot it, without overhauling everything at once?
Yeah.
And Do you think, and again, two parts to the question, and do you think there is a specific domain or a business unit you would recommend as a good candidate for a data mesh pilot?
Yeah, no, the bigger question actually. So last year at ODSC, I did one session was about the same
Oh,
question,
nice.
that how can one create a data mesh. So first of all, data mesh is a framework and not a platform by itself,
Correct.
right? So the same framework you can apply to your existing organization using existing tools to achieve the same benefit, right?
Hmm.
Though it is hard because the tools are not often developed in a way that it can support this framework. But there is a possibility. So I had one tech stack given in that talk, where you can use existing data platforms and all the tools that is available,
Hmm.
and stitch together to really form this concept. But I think the biggest challenge is not the tool actually, right? The biggest challenge is the organization mindset. So if you want to really apply this is not something that one team can take it and build it, or prove the do a POC, right?
Hmm.
This requires an organization wide alignment, and also not just alignment, but also requires a full maturity of organization as well on engineering and non-engineering level, right? Because this does trigger
Hmm.
org changes, right? It does change the organization how you operate. We are talking about domain having a responsibility of not only now create products for the business, but create a data product for the internal consumers,
Hmm.
right? So that's an added responsibility. Of course, we are saying that all the tools that domain requires, we will provide them and all of that. But in practicality, on reality, it doesn't often happen, and then
Hmm.
domain gets stuck with that, um, the inefficiencies. So if it ends up moving the inefficiencies from data lake to domain, that will be the failure, right?
I mean, I can imagine, there'll be a different skill set that domain teams will need to manage their own data if
Right.
that was
And I think this is where it becomes challenging, that we should not be asking domain to become a small data engineering team by itself.
absolutely.
And as I said, we want to cut this horizontally, and we
Hmm.
want to only give a responsibility to the domain about thinking about their data, all the transformation they should be doing, n- and configuring those transformation on the platform that is given to them. So they
Hmm.
are controlling the logic, they are controlling the transformation, they are controlling the data flow, they are controlling the data model
Hmm.
that is available for the consumers, but not necessarily has to do all of this themselves, right? So they should be like doing like 20% of the work on overall, in making the data product available, but all the quality contract observability platform should be available to them,
Hmm.
as easy as just configurations. So that is definitely challenging, but if you want to do a POC, the domain I would suggest is a user domain,
Okay.
where this is very classic data set that every company has. And then from depend user is very common across the industry, but depending on whether you're a financial industry or healthcare, you would have a different data sets to target for.
Hmm.
But one thing I would suggest is that look at the number of hops you have for the data in your current pipeline, and that will give you some idea on how you can just collapse that entire hops into one.
And talking about the pilot itself, right? So, are there any specific KPIs or metrics that you would recommend that one should track to ensure that this framework that we are going to apply is going to be valuable to the business?
It's purely velocity, right? It's a business velocity, how fast consumers can get the product out. um I mean, getting product out has a multiple things, right? Their own engineering efforts and stuff, but how much reduction of the data related dependency you have made for
Hmm.
consumers is the ultimate metric, right? um Today you do have to go and talk to data lake team and see how many number of time you have to do that. If you don't have to talk to data lake team or a data engineering team, if the business domain teams don't have to talk to data engineering team, and everything is available on their UI to figure out
Hmm.
the requirements that they have and go and just give their engineering team to build that solution, that would be the ultimate metric. So basically the goal of the whole data mesh is that you increase the business velocity, and
Hmm.
then you also reduce the data incident, right? And because you're sourcing the data directly from this domain rather than some intermediary data set that somebody has created and now he is not in the company, and like, this is just a one-off data set created for you. Majority of the people uses some other data set.
Hmm.
So if there is a quality issue, you're not going to have anybody looking into it, and operationally it's not being supported well, things like that, right? Data lake typically have like millions of entities or objects. Not everything gets tier 1 treatment on operations as well, right?
Correct.
So all of those issues you shouldn't have. So number of data issues, the amount of time it takes for you to get the data products out, or data related dependencies reduction, all of that could be a good matrix.
And so now let's take this, from say maybe the whiteboard discussion that we had to, to maybe real world scenarios, right? So when, I mean, no transformation like this happens at day one. And applying a framework such as data mesh at an enterprise scale, I believe, is obviously not a plug and play piece in no way. But so, there are always going to be hurdles, and maybe it could be mindset shifts as well, right? And I imagine you've probably encountered both technical and cultural challenges, if I was to say, when rolling frameworks such as these out. What, in your opinion, are some of the biggest internal hurdles, technical or non-technical, that you faced and you had to overcome?
Yeah, so yeah, data mesh is not like a vendor product that you can just install, right? And get it done with it. So it definitely requires a whole cultural shift, requires org-wide alignment, and it's not just technical one. Both business orgs and technical org requires a very heavy alignment.
Hmm.
The value proposition of this is still an open-ended question, actually, because different organization may see or realize a different value for this. Different leaders of the different business units may have a different perception or perceived value of this concept.
Hmm.
So while value is in question, one thing is sure, that it does trigger a way of working,
Hmm.
right? It does change heavily on how domain team operates, how data engineering team operates, how consumer teams will get to consume this data. So that changes a lot. So in terms of challenges, one of the challenges is that data mesh is one of those, I wouldn't say rare, but one of those concept in technology that hits all the right notes. Like when you talk about it, it's all ideal and it's all like a la la land, right? That it talks about decentralization, it talks about
Absolutely.
autonomy, and it talks about like domain ownership. So you have a right ownership, treating data as a product, all cool stuff, right? You can't disagree with any of these. But when when it comes to implementation, right, it does demand a maturity of some kind, and it does require the whole change of culture, and that's where it really fails.
Hmm.
And it this is where it is interesting that even though it's all the right concept and yet it fails. So it's not that it's because it's not a right thing to do. It is a very right thing to do, everybody realizes that, but it demands the maturity
Hmm.
at every layer of the organization, and that is, I don't know if I should say that, but that is rarely the case. You don't have a similar level of maturity in everything. And especially on this technical angle, right? Like my marketing team would have, or certain domain will have expertise in certain areas of that business domains, but not on these concept, which is very new. And just like everything that is new, people will kind of be cautious about adopting it, because it has a um, not a side effect, but repercussion on the whole organization,
Hmm.
right? So we don't want to end up in another data swamp because of half baked data mesh concept, right? But I think it's for a bigger organization where there are a lot of challenges, and if the velocity of business is clearly visible that it is impacted, and it is getting impacted, like you want to launch a new product, and your biggest dependency is on data, and especially now with all the AI depending
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
data,
absolutely.
every company wants to do AI. Their biggest dependency is data. So how that dependency is affecting your overall business velocity is the question we need to ask, right? And see if that makes sense for us to adopt to this new principle of way of working. Maybe this is a change of working in the new era, AI
Hmm.
era, right? Where everybody should be responsible for their own data as well. Otherwise, it's not going to be scalable. So the whole argument is also about not being scalable, right? The data lake model is going to be unscalable the moment you're crossing like 100 petabytes of data.
Yeah.
Y- you can't humanly operate on the lake, which is 100, 200, or even like exabyte level of data, right? Unless you have certain principle very strictly being followed. So I think I still want to leave this as an open-ended question. I'm also exploring it myself on really realizing the value of this.
Right. Right. No,
While
so
I,
that's
I
fine.
feel I
I
understand the
completely.
concept, but
No, no. Yeah, yeah. No, no, I completely understand. All right, Shay. So, so far we've covered, everything from data, decentralization, and then delivery. What I'd love to do now, if it's okay, would love to shift gears and get a glimpse of a person behind all of the engineering brilliance. So the next segment that we have coming up is, rapid fire. Quick questions, instinctive answers, no overthinking. So let me know when you're ready and we'll go for it.
yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right. Are you the let's plan the trip person or just show up person?
Just show up.
What's the one food that you will never understand the hype around?
Hype around. Um, Sushi.
Sushi? Okay. If you had to give up one forever, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
You're stranded on a desert island. What three apps you wish still work for you?
Maps. WhatsApp.
Nice.
And TikTok game.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, if you could master any non-technical skill, what would it be?
This is something I'm actively working on. Delegation. On
Okay.
the list.
If you had a clone for yourself, what is the first task that you would offload?
Oh my goodness, this is again something I'm working on, actually, to create a clone of myself to join all those useless meetings where I'm not required.
Okay, what's your I swear this works productivity hack?
Oh, Trello.
What is that one useless skill that you're unreasonably proud of?
Woodworking.
What would you be doing? Like maybe an alternate universe.
Oh, I do want to. I have a plan actually to run the NGO. I worked
Sure,
on.
sure, absolutely.
Worked on. This is my leader at PayPal who kind of retired and kind of worked on this called Kind Cart.
Mm-hmm.
And that concept is that people are not like literally just donating money, but they are actually buying like a food packet for a month, or an electricity bill for the orphanage, or a school fee and things like that. So you can choose what you want to contribute
Oh,
towards, and you will be like getting receipts and all of that with full transparency. I'm really proud of that. It's just that I couldn't like continue on that, but that is something I would love to do.
uh, pineapple on pizza. Yes or no?
I'm okay. I don't I don't ever hate on that. I don't prefer that, but I'm okay. I can handle it.
What would you rather have, perfect internet or perfect sleep?
Perfectly.
One conspiracy theory you wish were true.
So one conspiracy that I wish that is true is about the alien.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty much a wrap, Jay. This has been an incredible and insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for breaking down a lot of things that we discussed with so much clarity and depth. Uh, so thanks once again for joining us. Any parting words?
No, but thanks for hosting this. Actually, I was definitely excited about this to kind of share and amplify the whole message I'm trying to get out since last year
Hmm.
about the concept of data mesh, and there is a lot of confusion. Interestingly, when I spoke to Zama a couple times, and she also agrees that probably a dozen people understands this,
Yeah.
and everybody's just probably scratching the surface. And especially there is no like a startup behind this other than Zamak's only one, right? Next data. So it is challenging, and then the buzzword has created his own problem.
Hmm.
So thanks for having an opportunity to clarify, at least from my side of understanding, and I'll see if there is more to it and if there is a correction needs to happen. Um, so thanks for that opportunity.
Uh, I think the pleasure's all ours and the honor's all ours. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.